I can't wait to get glasses because I can't tell how this looks, but we're going to go with it. You guys, really quick, I just want to talk about confession for a minute. Now, I know, I talk about confession all the time. It's a huge sacrament, and the sacraments of the church are not talked about enough. You know, it's like we have these like physical tools for our spiritual walk, for our spirituality, for our sanctification that so many Catholics are not utilizing. Now, of course, the first one, the big one, is the Eucharist, right? True presence, body, blood, soul, and divinity. We all know that. Go to Mass. We have to go to Mass every Sunday and every day of holy day of obligation, and we want to receive the Eucharist. However, we can only receive the Eucharist in a state of grace, and that's why we have confession. In case for some reason you have committed a mortal sin and you literally are not in a state of grace, then you cannot receive the Eucharist, which forgives venial sins. So there's this whole circle of tools that we need to, but we need to be tracking like where we are with our, spiritual walk, with our grace, with God within us, and make sure that we're not doing anything the wrong way. Now, confession. It's amazing. I just went on Thursday. Every time I go to confession, I'm just like, oh my gosh, why don't I go more often? I go about every 4 to 5 weeks. I'm pretty much determined at this point to go every 4 weeks because it's amazing. Now, let me just explain something to you in case you don't know it. As we get further in our faith walk, sometimes we can look at examinations of consciences and be like, I'm not doing any big sins anymore. I've kind of stopped the big overt sinning. Like, we all have those moments where we kind of lose it, but again, those are actually character defects. So a sin is something that you like overtly decide to do. Okay, you can't just be, if you get frustrated and you just blurt out something, that's not technically a sin. It's more of like a character defect, and you want to ask Jesus and Mary to help you with like maybe growing in the virtue of meekness or growing in the virtue of patience or humility. But a sin is a direct turning away from God, right? So you base on the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not steal. You go to work and you take a pencil home by accident, not a sin. On purpose, it's a sin. Now, what I have found is that the more I grow closer to Christ, the more my past comes up and things that I didn't think were a sin because the world told me were okay, and maybe we're not on an examination of conscience, all of a sudden I realize that was a sin. I would never do that today, and I need to go confess it. Now, you could argue, well, why would I need to confess it? I mean, at the end of my, confession, I say, please forgive these and any other sins in my past life or any other sins I failed to mention. Yes, we are absolved from all venial sins that we fail to mention, right? And we are put into a state of grace even if we forget a mortal sin. However, we have a duty to Christ that the minute we remember some past sin, especially if it's a grave matter, we must confess it at our next confession. So when you think about going to confession and you're examining your conscience, don't just think about the last 4 weeks. Don't just think about the last week if you go weekly. Also kind of think, gosh, in my past, where there's something, especially something big, that maybe I never took to confession because I didn't realize it was a sin. I wasn't in the same place in my spiritual walk, and I wasn't really examining myself well back then. And so here I am now, and yes, I still fall into sin on a daily basis, but even more so, I need to confess those sins that were my past because, oh my gosh, you guys, when you really think through from your baptism, right, through today, anything from your past that you have not mentioned in confession, and you go and you confess it. So like for a cradle Catholic, that's a long time frame. Probably I could do a general confession and really get some things off my chest. But at this point, I've kind of like picked away every 4 to 5 weeks and kind of, gotten my past kind of, I think, leveled out now. But a general confession is also an awesome option for you if you're realizing there's like a lot from your past. When you take those past sins and you lay them at the feet of Jesus in the confessional, they just leave you, right? No longer do you have to think about that. Be like, did I confess that? Did not confess that? Maybe you've confessed it, but you haven't confessed it well. because maybe the first time you confessed it, it just kind of tripped you up and you realized it and you hurriedly said it and you weren't in that state where you could really feel that sorrow. Now, I'm not saying to repeat the same, like, if you've done something big in your past and you don't feel forgiven, I'm not saying to keep going back to confession for that same sin so that you can finally get that feeling, right? We don't get a feeling from confession. We get reason and knowledge that we are forgiven. But if you've confessed it once and you felt like you didn't do a very good job, like, you know how sometimes we'll go into the confessional and we'll say something, but we don't really, like, we haven't really meditated on it. We maybe haven't really, accused ourselves of it properly. I'm not a priest, but I would say from my experience to take it and make it more specific and really confess it wholeheartedly and reject it. Reject whatever that past sin was wholeheartedly. It's very possible that you will come away feeling, or at least realizing, that you're in a stronger state of grace than maybe before. So again, I hope that aligns with Catholic teaching. I think it does. But you don't want to be scrupulous and keep going back for the same thing over and over. And definitely if your priest says, stop confessing this, then stop, right? You're good. But I think we know our souls, and we know when we make a good confession, and we know we make kind of a lackluster confession, or just a confession that wasn't as thought through. And so there's that. The other thing I want to mention really fast in this video is that I have started saying, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." It's been, 5 weeks since my last confession. I accuse myself of the following sins. That, I heard that in one of the Sensus Fidelium talks on confession, and it really stuck with me. Because when we are at a particular judgment, the devil can accuse us of anything that we have failed to accuse ourselves of, right? So that's pretty powerful, especially if you have some of these bigger past sins that maybe you, like I said, didn't know were sins back then, or out of ignorance committed them, whatever it is, right? We all have our youth, and things happen in our youth. And so when we go to the confessional and say, I accuse myself of the following sins, it's pretty much like spitting in the devil's face. Like, look, devil, I'm doing it. I'm sitting in front of Jesus Christ as a priest is in persona Christi, and I'm accusing myself of these sins. You have no power over me. Just like on the line from Labyrinth. That movie is amazing, because that last scene where she says, you have no power over me, it's just like what we should be telling the devil all the time. So I think that's it. I want to encourage everybody to go confession. Now is the time, right? Advent is around the corner. It starts a week from tomorrow, and we want to prepare ourselves. Like I said in my last video, it's a mini Lent, right? And we really want to prepare ourselves for this season. There is this growing towards Christ that happens during Advent if you let him guide you towards him. And we have to really cleanse ourselves and be in the state of grace in order to fully partake in that gift. And so, like my daughter was taught, it's like a window that's kind of dirty, and even if it's just venial sins, right? The window's kind of dirty, and it's just good to wash it off. And yes, the Eucharist forgives venial sins. Now, I don't know, and I haven't been able to figure this out, if you have to consciously think of the sin before receiving the Eucharist and kind of call it to mind and say, I'm sorry, maybe say an act of contrition, and then receive the Eucharist. I'm not sure if Eucharist just blanket washes away all sins without our conscious rejecting of them. So that's why I still go to confession, because confession is the only way to get that absolute knowledge of forgiveness. And also confession gives you those graces to work towards virtue in those areas you struggle. So if you're struggling with the same sin over and over again, go to confession. If you have a habit that you want to break, go to confession weekly. Go to confession twice a week. Because the graces that you receive are particular to what you confess. So, as a parent, whatever I want to work on, I take that to confessional, even if I say it every time, because I want that particular grace, and I see Mother Mary and I see Jesus Christ working in me and giving those graces to weed out these personal defects, these character flaws that are making me not as good of a parent as I want to be. So that's all I have for you today, you guys. God bless. I'm actually going to announce in my rosary video live tomorrow who the winners of the giveaways are. So I'll just put that in the beginning of the rosary video. I don't have time to like kind of make a separate video, and there's really no reason to do so. So I'm excited to do that. So I will announce that in the beginning, like the first 5 minutes of the rosary live tomorrow. I'm going to do it at 1 p.m. Central, so look out for that. I absolutely love praying the rosary live with you guys, and so let's do it again tomorrow on Sunday, right? After we've all received the Eucharist, we'll get a plenary indulgence if we're not attached to sin. So if you need help with that, I'll put up my video right here about plenary indulgences. And that said, go to confession today so you can get that as well. So God bless. Have a very beautiful day. I'll talk to you guys again soon.